Before start this video, please subscribe my channel and click on bell icon. Thanks.
The tradition of giving death row inmates a special last meal dates back several thousand years. Some historians believe ancient peoples gave their condemned peers specific last meals out of fear of the spirit world. In ancient Greece, leaders had to feed a person before execution so they could cross the River Styx into the underworld with a full stomach. If not, the dead were destined to come back as hungry ghosts. By the early 1800s, the last meal was a common thing in prisons across the United States. It was meant to offer a humane, soft final moment for the person condemned to die at the hands of the state. Then, in the early 1900s, several U.S. states began to really solidify the ritual of the last meal. In 1924, Texas started to hold a specific last meal event for each condemned prisoner after the state government took over executions from each county. This post looks at the last meals of 10 notorious killers condemned to live their final days on death row. In all 10 cases, these inmates chose very specific, very unique meals to eat before they met their maker. And as you'll soon see at the very bottom of this list, one inmate recently ended up ruining the practice for all the rest. Related, 10 craziest privileges serial killers enjoyed in prison. 10. Gary Simmons Jr. Eating the highest calorie last meal request ever made by a death row inmate. Gary Carl Simmons Jr. was a grocery store butcher who was convicted of a horrific 1996 slaying. Simmons was living in Mississippi at the time when a drug dealer named Jeffrey Wolf drove there from Houston. Wolf and his girlfriend were in town to collect on a $20,000 drug debt that Simmons and another man named Timothy Milano had been putting off paying. They told the woman that her life depended on how well she performed sexually. After they were done raping her, Simmons and Milano went back to Wolf's body to dismember it with knives from Simmons's grocery store gig. Then, they threw the dead man's remains into a bayou behind the home where the murder occurred. Wolf's girlfriend managed to escape the house when they were out doing this. She ran to a neighbor's home and called the police. When the cops came, they arrested Milano and Simmons. Milano ended up being sentenced to life in prison, but Simmons got the death penalty. As for his last meal, Simmons's stomach was bigger than his eyes. The condemned inmate ordered a meal that logged in at just under 29,000 calories. It contained a little bit of everything: pizza, Doritos, McDonald's fast food, French fries, ice cream, and a strawberry shake. Perhaps unsurprisingly, he didn't finish it before being taken away to die. In 1995, he was involved with the bombing of a federal government building in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. The bomb blew away much of the federal complex. Then, after he was convicted, his execution was an even bigger deal. When it came time for him to die, there weren't enough seats in the chamber's gallery for victims' families to witness the state-sanctioned killing. Before he was put to death by the state of Florida at the age of 43, he had killed women in far-flung places from the Sunshine State to Colorado, California, and Washington. He was eventually convicted of rape, necrophilia, and 36 counts of murder. His awful run of terror should have ended sooner than it did. But he escaped from a Colorado prison in the middle of his terrible spree, went back on the run, and killed more unsuspecting women throughout the rest of the 1970s. When it came time for him to finally face the electric chair in 1989, the entire country was ready for him to die. And on the fateful day of his execution, Bundy didn't appear ready to make one last show before death. Then, a new fact of the case came out in a terrible twist. One of the officers who arrested Harris and his brother after the crime spree was the father of one of the boys who had just been killed. The cop had no idea about the murderous connection until after the arrest was made. By the time he was arrested, charged, and convicted, all of San Diego was sick of Harris's reign of terror. In 1992, he was led to the execution chamber in the death row at San Quentin State Prison. For his final meal, he ordered quite a feast of unhealthy proportions: a 21-piece bucket of KFC chicken, 2 large Domino's pizzas, a bowl of ice cream, a bag of jelly beans, a 6-pack of soda, and 1 final pack of Camel cigarettes. It's unclear whether he knew one little change made by prison officials on that fateful day: they cooked him 2 Tombstone pizzas instead of the requested Domino's fare. Sadly, that's not what he got. Instead, the immigrant carpenter was accused of kidnapping and killing the infant son of aviation legend and superstar pilot Charles Lindbergh during the Great Depression. In 1936, after the trial of the century that convicted Hauptmann in the baby's kidnapping and murder, a judge sentenced him to death. With no appeals in place like what death row inmates go through nowadays, Hauptmann had nowhere to turn. Just weeks after his conviction, he was sent to the electric chair at New Jersey State Prison in the city of Trenton. On the day of his death, he got a simple meal before the end came: roasted chicken, cherries, French fries, buttered peas, olives, and celery. To top it off, he was given a slice of cake for dessert. Then, he was led to the electric chair, where he proclaimed his innocence right up until the moment he was pronounced dead. He was a married father of 2 young children in the early 1970s. In his spare time, he worked as a clown at local hospitals, trying to cheer up sick kids. He was known around town for dressing up in a clown costume and makeup to donate his time to charity events, too. And he was a manager of several KFC restaurants around Chicago in his professional life. When his crimes were unearthed, literally, he was charged with multiple counts of murder and jailed. After a shocking criminal court case, Gacy was sentenced to death. After eating to his heart's content, he was executed by lethal injection. As one of Adolf Hitler's most trusted confidants, Eichmann oversaw the gassing deaths and executions of untold numbers of Jewish people, gypsies, homosexuals, and other unfortunate people across Germany's concentration camps. After the Holocaust, and once World War II ended, Eichmann fled Germany before he could be captured. He went to Argentina, where he lived in secret with a large group of other former Nazi officers and leaders. The shocking and frank admission came to best exemplify what historians would later call the banality of evil. At the end of his trial, he was found guilty of years of war crimes under the rule of Nazi Germany and sentenced to death. Then, in a bid to make sure no witnesses were left behind, he shot the 2 men to death and discarded their bodies. His plan to avoid leaving witnesses was foiled, though, when he accidentally shot himself with the murder weapon. He was arrested, charged, and ultimately convicted of the murders. At his sentencing hearing, a Utah judge determined it was appropriate for him to face the death penalty. Lawyers and judges had to re-evaluate the death row appeals process because of his then unique demands. And his story was so significant that it became the subject of author Norman Mailer's The Executioner's Song. His last meal, before death, was a simple one: a hamburger, a baked potato, a hard-boiled egg, and some coffee. Rumor has it he even took 3 shots of Jack Daniel's whiskey that was smuggled into the prison. The North Carolina woman was outwardly a devout Christian and similar to many of the other older women in the state at that time. But she harbored a dark secret that eventually came out in time. While on death row, she kept herself busy by praying and knitting things for her grandchildren. Then, on November 2, 1984, it all ended for Barfield. She made history very early that morning by being the first woman ever executed by lethal injection. Hours earlier, on the night of November 1st, she was given her last meal. Rather than go for a full spread, Velma chose to eat a few snacks to cap her sordid life. Soon, though, they were picked up by cops and charged with the heinous murder. Brewer, who had been involved in white supremacist groups while serving a prior prison sentence, was tried and convicted of the murder. Then, he was sentenced to death. But his death row stay would significantly change the last meal policy in Texas. When it came time for his last meal in 2011, Brewer requested an unreal amount of food. To top it off, Brewer asked for 3 root beers. Then, when the food came, he discarded it all. The condemned man never ate a bite of it, and it had to be thrown away. When word got out about the stunt, Texas prison officials were incensed. Public outcry and complaints from lawmakers prompted them to officially discard the Lone Star State's last meal policy, which had begun in earnest nearly a century before. In that way, Brewer's memorable final stunt ended thousands of years of common practice with last meals before death. 10. Fact checked by Darcy Heikkinen. Thanks for watching. Credits to listverse.com. Please subscribe my channel for more videos.